Well, folks, looks like we're back at the barn and it's time to call it a day. I sure do appreciate you spending your time with me. If you want to help keep this podcast going by supporting me, you can get a paid subscription on Substack, where I'm Resistor Vic. Or if you're the type that'd rather go to PayPal, I'm also resistorvic@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Hey everybody, this is Big Mike, your home for progressive news, issues, and candidates here in Colorado. First off, if you are here for the Resistor Vic podcast, I am filling in while he runs for House District 47. Support him however you can, and welcome to the Resistance. And of course, a quick reminder before we get started, please vote, get your ballots turned in. Amanda can back me up here. I believe Election Day is Tuesday, is that right?
Tuesday, June 30th, has to be in by 7 p.m.
That's right. And it is too late to mail them. So put them in the Dropbox or vote in person on Election Day. And with that, I will throw it over. I'm here today with Amanda Gonzalez, running for Secretary of State. So Amanda, please introduce yourself and let the folks know why you're running.
Yeah, so good to see you. My name is Amanda Gonzalez. I am currently the clerk and reporter in Jefferson County, and I am running for Colorado Secretary of State. I am running because our democracy is on the line, right? I just can't stress enough how important it is that we make sure and protect the right to vote. It is the foundation of all other rights. And so I'm currently the clerk and reporter in Jefferson County, where I run elections for nearly 500,000 people. And I am the only person in this race who's running for Secretary of State who has ever actually run an election. I am also the only attorney, and I would be the first Latina to serve as Colorado's Secretary of State.
Fantastic. Glad to hear it. Tell us, what are the main roles of the Secretary of State, and why? You mentioned you're the only one who's running an election. Why are you currently the most qualified? Why should people vote for you?
Yeah. Right. So Secretary of State, it sounds like a position that makes copies, right? But it is actually the chief democracy defender for Colorado. So my current role, right, I'm the clerk and reporter in Jeffco. Sometimes I think of that as maybe a teacher, right? So this is the front lines. This is the person that is doing the work, that is making sure that, your kids are learning, or in this case, making sure that your elections are running smoothly, that they're safe and transparent, safe, secure, and transparent. The Secretary of State, in my analogy here, is a little bit like a principal. So it is the person that is making sure that clerks and recorders have the resources they need, have the training they need, have the support they need. And in the case of a Tina Peters, making sure that we have accountability and that our elections can be trusted. So chief democracy defender, and, this is the person that is going to oversee the 2028 presidential election. And so that is not going to be the time for anybody to be learning on the job. I am also, the only attorney in the race. I have taught election law at DU's law school. I can get real nerdy with these things. Prior to being elected, I was the executive director of a nonpartisan voting rights nonprofit called Colorado Common Cause, where I helped write the law that created automatic voter registration at our DMVs. I helped write the law that dramatically expanded the number of drop boxes in the state. I have been the nerd behind the scenes, making sure that we have strong election laws in Colorado. I know how to protect and expand our democracy because I've been doing it for most of my career.
I was going to say, so not only are you enacting these laws, but you're also writing them.
Yes.
So it sounds like you're more than qualified. You understand things front and back.
Helped build the system, and I've actually been the ones on the front line running it.
Nice. And you mentioned Tina Peters. I was going to bring this up later, but since you mentioned her so early, for those who don't know, Tina Peters was convicted basically for election interference. She brought folks who weren't allowed access to the ballots in her county into her county's ballots. She was convicted, I think it was 9 years. And a few months ago, Jared Polis shortened her sentence executively, even though she was receiving a shorter sentence from the courts at the time. Could you tell us why that is dangerous, and especially for a Democratic governor, a very bad idea?
Yeah, it was a very bad idea. So I guess I'll back up a little bit. Back when I was at Colorado Common Cause, I used to run the state's largest nonpartisan election protection effort. So trained hundreds of attorneys every year and had a hotline in English and Spanish that people could call in if they were experiencing voter suppression or if they just had a question about elections, which is the questions you wanted to get, right? Like, where's my nearest drop box? And so I worked really closely with the election officials, the clerks and recorders, before I was one. And in 2020, every election official I knew got some version of a death threat, right? That because of the environment that President Trump has created, because of the environment that people like Tina Peters have created, it can be really dangerous or really scary for election officials. And so when I ran for clerk and recorder in Jefferson County in 2022, I had to ask friends, hey, if this gets really ugly, could I stay with you for more than a month? And that is just a reality of elections right now. And hopefully we get to the other side of this and we build something better at the end of the day. But for now, it's the environment that we're in. And so, the staff in Jeffco, honestly, even people that do data entry often won't tell anybody outside of their closest friends and family what they do for a living. They'll just say, oh, I do data entry, but they won't say they work in elections. And so back to your question of why is this bad? Because it creates dangerous environments, because it creates real threats against election workers, because it emboldens election deniers to make threats. And even if they don't make threats, it is not healthy for a democracy to have this amount of mis and disinformation, right? It's okay to ask questions, right? I get real nerdy all the time when I'm talking to groups. I'm telling people ask me questions about how elections work. I'm happy to talk about it. Questions are healthy. Threats and trying to put out mis and disinformation because you are trying to suppress the vote is not okay. And,
right.
Commuting her sentence just feeds that fire.
So, and I want to break this down into two sections. And first, I want to say, yes, Trump and Tina Peters have contributed to this, but I want to stress, I've heard J.D. Vance saying this. I've heard the Speaker of the House say these things.
Yeah.
I want to tie this to Republicans because, when Democrats talk about the 2016 election and Russian interference, they're not referring to the polls, the actual votes cast. They're talking about, Russia was pumping in propaganda. They were pumping in money. Sure. But they didn't affect our actual votes. And I think there's a difference there. And then when we're talking
and there's a difference when we know what the facts are, right? I think a lot of people, high up strategists in the Republican Party who subscribe or who push out these lies around elections, I don't actually know if they themselves believe it, right? It is a tactic.
Yes. And that's what I was going to say to you. Yeah. I want to split this into two groups because I believe there are two groups. There's the people pushing these lies, like Trump, like J.D. Vance, like the Speaker of the House. Republicans in general are pushing these lies. Republican voters are believing them for some of them, and some of them.
Some of them, yes. This is not everybody, I suppose. But it is a noisy group.
Right. So how do we break through? Because as he's some of these people don't even believe it. They're just saying it to say it. So how do we break through to the people that they are lying to convince them that our elections are safe and their votes are safe and that no one is actually interfering with our votes?
Yeah. So in my current office, I've done a number of things to help chip away at this. And I just want to acknowledge that there is a small, noisy group of people that are not coming at this with genuine curiosity, right? They are just locked in their beliefs despite facts. And so those folks were probably not going to change their mind. There's probably something pretty big that would need to shift for them. But how we're doing it for people who, maybe they watch Fox News and so they've got some questions, but they're not invested in lies and conspiracies, right? That's fine. Those are the kinds of folks that I want to come in, I want to have discussions with. And so a couple of the things that we have done in Jefferson County that I would continue to work on as Secretary of State. So first, created a full-time community engagement department because we know that there are some people who feel safe in government offices, who come into government offices, who know how to navigate systems. And that is not true for a different group of people. And so we asked ourselves, who are the people that need accurate information about elections who might not be coming to us directly? And so how can we go to them? right? And get accurate information out into the community. And so we were at every high school, every dispensary, every laundromat that would take us talking with normal voters, normal residents. So you have to go out to the community and you have to get accurate information out. The second thing we did is we created a first of its kind for my office community advisory group. All different kinds of people, all different political persuasions, had the local chair of the Republican Party, had folks from the Democratic Party. The whole idea being that I do fundamentally believe that we make better decisions when we have more people giving input, right? And also, how do we create trusted messengers all across the community or, in the future as Secretary of State, all across the state? Hey, I might be a great messenger for certain groups of people. And there are other groups of people that want to hear from somebody that maybe looks more like them or grew up in the same town they did. And so let's bring those people in so that they can go communicate accurate information back to their own communities. And then finally, we process ballots for nearly 500,000 voters, and we give tours of our ballot processing facility. If you have a question, hey, I saw this thing about signatures or whatever on the news and I have questions, come in and see it for yourself. See that every part of our election is handled by bipartisan teams. See the number of security features in your election. See the number of your friends and family that are serving as election judges and helping our process move securely and safely. It is not just one person. It is not just your clerk and reporter that is processing all of these ballots. I physically couldn't do it. It is normal people from our community that sign up to be election judges, which is what we call poll workers. So, how do we convince those people? We invite them in. We address their questions when they're coming with genuine curiosity.
And with all that being said, Colorado is considered, a gold standard election. What do you think we could do to keep improving?
Yeah. The reality is we live in a democracy that was never designed for all of us, right? It has never worked for everyone. A great example of this is in Colorado, people who are in jail for a misdemeanor or who are awaiting their trial in a county jail are still eligible to vote. The only people who can't vote in Colorado because of involvement with our criminal justice system are people who are incarcerated because of a felony, right? But if you're on probation, you're eligible to vote. If you're on parole, you're eligible to vote. If you're back in your community because you finished your sentence, you're eligible to vote. But being eligible to vote is fundamentally different from actually being able to cast your ballot, right? I would be the first Latina Secretary of State. I know the civil rights history of having people having the right to vote, but not actually having access to their ballot. And so in Jefferson County in 2022, the year I got elected, I found out that out of about 850 eligible voters in our jail, only 3 were actually able to cast their ballot. And so, went to our sheriff, said, hey, let me open a vote center in your jail. She wouldn't agree to that. And so we went and passed a state law, and Colorado became the first state to have in-person voting in every single county jail. And so in Jeffco alone, we brought that number from 3 to 350. And so all of that is to say that we continue to have members of our community that our democracy still isn't working for. And so those are the questions we need to be asking ourselves so that we make sure that everyone can actually have a voice.
And what's your opinion? I know we recently failed a measure to put in ranked choice voting here in Colorado. I was a little hesitant because it was backed by one of the billionaire oligarchs here in Colorado.
And it was really complicated. There was a lot of pieces to that one.
Yes. And I didn't trust him, so I voted against it. Even though, you see ranked choice voting, DSA is in support of it, those kind of things. So tell us, where are you on ranked choice voting and improvement? Yes. What are your thoughts?
And, just for listeners who might not be as nerdy as we are, right? This is a different style of voting where instead of just selecting one candidate that you like, you rank an order of, I like this one the best, this one second best, this one third best. There's a lot of different ways to do it. And some of the nuance of the policies do matter, but that's a general overview. I think the fundamental question that we need to be asking ourselves for any reform is, is this helping voters have their voices heard? Right? And I think ranked choice voting might be one of the pieces of that. I think there's probably a lot of pieces of that, of how do we reform and make sure that people are actually having their voices heard. So where I would love to try it is a presidential primary, right? Because I think some of the other concerns is, what if we have a longer ballot? There's initiatives on some of the ballots along with candidates. So you'd be using RCV, ranked choice voting, for part of it, but not all of it. All of that, I think we could figure out, but I worry that it might be confusing to some voters and they might screw it up and then their voice isn't heard. That's not a reason not to do it. It's a reason to make sure you have a really good educational component. And so a great place to start might be a presidential primary, because it's a simple ballot, right? We just have our presidential primary on there. And it's also a race where most people can name more than one candidate who's running. And they could probably tell you sort of how they would rank them, right? Like, we all have our feelings about which candidates we like or don't like, which ones we could kind of tolerate. And so the other nice thing about that is I'm always encouraging people to vote early. And sometimes in a presidential primary, people will vote early and then their candidate that they voted for will drop out. If that happened to you...
I never even considered that, yeah.
Yeah, right? Maybe your number one person decided to stop running. At least you would still have, maybe your number 2 or 3 or 4, whatever we decided to number we'd let you rank. That might be a way to ensure that people's voices are still heard, even if their candidate drops out, which is something that happens in a presidential primary.
So an improvement depending on the system that you implement. Okay.
Yeah. And again, let's bring in the stakeholders. Let's talk about it. Let's make sure it's actually working for everybody. And let's try it on a simple ballot.
Gotcha. And you mentioned the one that we failed here was sort of convoluted. What were your thoughts on that bill? You're probably the best election expert I've had on. And again, I've heard so many good things, but why is this billionaire oligarch pushing this? So that's why I voted against it. What were your thoughts on the Colorado specific bill?
Yeah, there was and you'll have to forgive me because it's like anytime we get a little bit past the election, I'm like, what were the details of that one? So I don't have all of the details in front of me, but I do think, it was really complicated. And so if it had passed, we would have figured it out, right? We would have made sure that we do things to make sure it works for voters. And there was a lot happening in that bill. It wasn't, I don't remember, it wasn't just ranked choice voting, but it was a number of other things. And I do worry about, do we have the communication plans and do we have the education components to make sure that people understand this? Even in the way that we vote now, where you bubble in just one, people screw it up all the time.
Yeah.
They write us little love notes. There's weird arrows on their ballots. We're like, we literally have a team of bipartisan judges that their job is to look at those ballots that people have drawn all kinds of crazy things on, to try and figure out voter intent and make sure that we're trying to cast this ballot in the way that you intended. And so anytime there's kind of a sweeping overhaul, I worry about, have we educated voters? Are we going to disenfranchise anybody that we didn't mean to?
Sorry, just crossing out the questions that I've asked already.
I know we're covering a wide variety of things today.
So I did want to take a chance. Obviously, I was mentioning DSA is a big supporter of ranked choice voting. We've seen just recently DSA sweep some elections in New York. We have a DSA candidate in Denver. Julie Gonzalez is a Working Families Party member. Have you reached out to DSA or Working Families Party? Do you consider yourself a member of either, and do you have their support?
Yeah, so we've been, but I say we. I'm running for office, but it is a team of volunteers of people that are helping do all this. So I definitely always feel like it's we. But yes, so the campaign has been endorsed by Working Families Party. I was just knocking doors with Julie Gonzalez earlier today, trying to get the word out for a bunch of real progressive candidates, right? We're seeing the word progressive on all of these mailers for candidates whose ideology is across the board, right? But yes, proud to be affiliated with Working Families Party, proud to have their endorsement. I know there's been some DSAs that have endorsed the campaign. There's been some DSAs that are not endorsing on certain races. So there have been some that have recommended me as the Secretary of State candidate as well. So, always proud to have the support of the people that are doing the work to try and make their communities better.
And what are your politics? Do you consider yourself a democratic socialist or a standard Democrat or somewhere between?
It's so funny. I was just talking to somebody the other day about the word moderate, which has never been a descriptor that felt like me. Right. I'm a queer Latina. I'll be the first Latina to ever be Secretary of State. I'm bi. I would be the first out person to be Secretary of State. I don't know that you can have moderate politics. I don't know what that means with those identities, right? Because, like I said, I know that our system was not built for everybody. I know it has left out. And I also know that that's not the way democracy is supposed to work, right? Democracy only functions when we actually all have a voice. And for a long time, we have seen that folks of color have been left out for a long time. Women were left out, right? Like, I think low income and poor and working class folks continue to not be centered in our current system. And we have a responsibility to change that. It's pretty funny because my dad is a Republican who has voted for Trump multiple times.
Same.
And, it happens. And my whole life, people have joked of like, how did she happen? Right? How did they would say to him, like, how did this happen? I was like, it's funny because I actually think that it is a same want of fairness and a different perspective on the problems with the systems that have gotten us here.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think my dad thinks that the systems aren't fair, but for really different reasons.
Yeah. And to your point, like, I would say the goal has always been to keep brown and black folks from voting, queer folks if they can, and they are willing to throw the white working class under the bus if it meets those ends.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody as I was knocking doors today, and they were saying, what a nightmare the SAVE Act would have been, and who has this very limited list of IDs and who doesn't. And I was like, Karen, who doesn't have passports? Lots of really working class folks, and many of them are Republican.
Yeah.
Right? Like these bills that would disenfranchise us, that would limit who can actually have their voice heard, is not, I don't think, limited to the people they think it is.
I was just wondering that too, because my dad, again, the big Trump supporter, he's like, oh yeah, we need to pass this. I'm like, God, when's the last time you had a fucking passport, dude?
Yeah. And many Americans don't. I wish I knew the statistic, but many Americans don't. And I totally get it. So I'm somebody that I had never been on a plane until I was in college. Both of my parents worked a lot and had the kind of jobs where you had to like request your PTO off a long time in advance. And frankly, I think they used all of it on like the stuff for kids. Right? They were taking days off to take us on field trips and stuff. So we didn't have like extra days that they could like take us to, Jamaica or something.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, my parents were, I think, well past their 40s when they got passports because they didn't need them for travel before that.
All right. And then are there any other duties of the Secretary of State that people are less familiar with?
Yes. So it's a little bit like my current role in that I not only oversee elections, but I also oversee 5 motor vehicle offices, land recordings, marriage licenses, passport applications, and records for the county. It feels a little bit like an other duties as assigned kind of role. But the Secretary's office is somewhat similar in that overseeing elections, and that is the reason I am running for this office, is I want to protect the right to vote. And it also oversees business registration. So if you have an LLC, you have a small business, I mean, really any size business, you register it with the Secretary of State's office. Raffles, bingos, that kind of stuff, all under the purview of the Secretary of State's office. And then I think the second most important, or maybe the first most important, depending on how you look at it, is the campaign finance system for the state. So if you are trying to figure out who is trying to influence your vote, right? You mentioned having, like, one of the reasons you didn't trust an initiative was you knew who was funding it. Correct. And you were worried that your values didn't align with the funders. And so that made you feel away. And that is actually exactly what we want, right? I want you to know who is trying to influence your vote. I want you to know who's funding candidates, right? You know, the answer for some of that is like, all of my friends and family have donated. But, you know, is it big PACs? Is it people whose values don't align with yours? And the way that you figure that out is you go to the Secretary of State's website and you go into a portion of it called Tracer that you can look up any campaign, any candidate, and see kind of how much money have they raised, and is it from sources that don't feel good to you? Or I guess the flip side is do feel good to you. And so it is the Secretary of State's system where you would get that information. They also regulate campaign finance.
That is huge.
Yes.
Quick diversion from that. And I've made a note for campaign finance. I want to come back to that. But I do have, there's a lady at Arapahoe County building who told me my dog could not sign our marriage certificate, even though it very clearly said they could on the website.
Oh.
And we did it anyway. And she gave us a very mean look. And I would like you to fire her. Literally. Because she lied to my face.
That's so funny. I mean, some of the hiccups in some counties. So we do allow, I guess I'll back up, more fun facts. So in Colorado, you can self-solemnize your marriage. So you don't have to have a priest or an officiant or anybody like that. You and your partner can just decide that you were married and you sign your own marriage license. You don't have to have. And so that's why your dog can be on there, because really it's just you self-solemnizing. Your dog doesn't have extra authority.
That's so yeah. We went ahead and, dipped his paw in ink and snipped it on there. And she was all mad about it.
Some of the reasons that some offices get grumpy is we scan all that information in. And so sometimes the dog paw prints can make it difficult to scan in. We find ways to make it happen, right? Like government should be serving you. It should be doing its best to make things work for normal people. We actually hosted in Jefferson County an event we called Positively in Love for Valentine's Day one year. And we invited people to bring in their pets to sign their marriage licenses right there. And we had just the cutest animals. It was all dogs and cats. I was kind of hoping we'd get a goat or somebody that would bring in a creative pet. But yeah, we encouraged people to come in and have their pets sign off on their marriage license, which was the cutest day at work ever.
Very nice. So jumping back to the real questions, campaign funding is under the Secretary of State purview. Is it possible, people joke about, we should make them wear jackets like NASCAR. Is not literally, but is there something we can do on the state level to force groups like One Main Street to say who they're funding, who they're getting their funding from?
Yeah, $100,000 of dark money just came in against me within the last week, and so that is real. That oftentimes there are candidates that are running for the right reasons. They are running because they want to represent their community, and they don't want to represent the interest of billionaires. They don't want to represent the interest of these wealthy special interests. And so you're exactly right. All this dark money that is very hard to trace gets dumped in at the last minute. Often telling some pretty horrendous lies about some people, right? Sometimes it's more, benign than that, but we've seen some really ugly stuff this cycle. So what can we do about it? Hawaii and Montana have recently passed some legislation that uses the power of that licensure for entities to try and limit who can invest, that's probably not the right word, right? Who can try and influence politics with their big dollars. I think that's really fascinating, and we should be following it closely and look if we can do something similar in Colorado. The reason I'm kind of hedging there is I think those laws will be litigated. We haven't seen that yet. And so let's see if they end up passing muster, or if we have to tweak some things so that it will survive in Colorado, because I would like to pass legislation that survives, not that gets struck down 6 months later. And those are, if I remember correctly, those are both to stop basically corporate spending, period. I think Montana's going the ballot initiative route, and Hawaii has gone the legislative route. So I think we're going to see
here in the next
See
few
what
months.
happens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had David Selling on a few weeks ago, or I guess
cool.
a few months ago at this point. But then we talked briefly about the Montana plan. I think this was before Hawaii had done what it did. But yeah, I would love to see that here.
So I think we need to follow those closely, see what we can do. The bare minimum is increased transparency, right? Like, we live in a hellscape that is the aftermath of Citizens United. We have terrible case law from the Supreme Court that until this court changes, we're not going to get better case law, right? We are going to continue to live in this nightmare. So what do we do while we're here? Well, Citizens United and the other cases around it said that transparency is supposed to be the backstop, right? You're supposed to be able to understand who's trying to influence your vote and then, sort of run the calculation that you did about, like, does this feel good to me? And we know that that's not really doable when we are just flooded with dark money. But even the information that is there, that is in Tracer, that is on the Secretary of State's website, is really hard to find. There was a journalist from the Colorado Sun who has mostly retired at this point, named Sandra Fish, who is just a phenomenal journalist around campaign finance. And literally, she wrote code to extract data, to take the data out of Tracer and then try to make sense of how it all hung together. You should not have to write code to figure out who is trying to influence your vote, right? At a minimum, the website right now, have you ever been on there? Have you ever tried to figure out where the money's coming from?
I've not, no.
Okay, you should do it sometime. It's going to be a somewhat frustrating experience. The back button doesn't consistently work depending on what page you're on. And if transparency is supposed to be the backstop, then we at least have to make the money that is more transparent able for the average person to see.
Hear me out.
Yeah.
Have you tried putting it in Clone?
I mean, you joke, but you can download CSVs of campaign finance information. If you can go right now, and if you're trying to see all of my donors to see if any of them seem shady to you, you can do that. And I have had friends who've said just hit download and then put it into Glot and asked it. So, maybe that's a temporary solution for people, but you should be able to just go on the government website and see what's going on.
Turn the AI against the oligarchs. All right, Amanda. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. That's all I've got for you. Is there anything else you'd like to add? And go ahead, Amber.
No, I just, like we said at the top, the last day to vote is Tuesday at 7 p.m. Postmarks are not good enough. So as you said, it needs to get dropped off at a vote center or in one of the 24/7 secure drop boxes. Those are all over the state. Vote centers are open for you. So even if you got your ballot in the mail and you just want to vote in person, or you need a translated ballot or a more accessible ballot, you can go into any vote center in your county. You don't have to go to the one that's closest to your house. And if you really wait to the last minute, which I really hope you don't, and you are out of town, you even can stop by a vote center in a different county if you had to. And you could still at least vote a statewide ballot. So it wouldn't have the local stuff on it, but it would have all the statewide stuff. So friendly reminder, make sure you do that by 7 p.m. I know primaries aren't always as sexy, but they are so important. And in a lot of districts, this is kind of deciding who's gonna be the victor.
I mean, frankly, this is what I've been looking forward to. When I started this channel, I'm a leftist. I'm for a long time, very critical of the Democratic Party.
Yes.
And essentially after this
critique
last
is healthy.
election, I was I can't sit on the sidelines and watch these people screw up anymore. So I've got.
And there are so many good candidates.
Yeah, bro. I am so stoked for this primary.
You don't have to pick somebody that you're lukewarm about. There are just so many good candidates running right now.
Yeah, I'm very stoked. I would love Colorado to be the state that proves that DSA is not just a New York thing. It's the left is the West is left. As I like to say.
But there are progressives here, and we're doing the work, and we're going to win this thing.
Yes. And last but not least, let the folks know where they can find you, where they can donate, and how they can support your campaign.
Yes. Amanda for Colorado, all over the internet. So find us on Threads, find us on Instagram, find us on Facebook. AmandaForColorado.com is the website. get involved in the last couple days here. Would love to have your support.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, and we will see you next time.
Hey there, this is the Resistor Vic Podcast. I'm here to get folks thinking about politics as something that's really about regular people like you and me, and to realize that together we can make a difference.